Welcome to the Good Divorce Show, where we can help you learn how to navigate the journey of divorce with less conflict, less debt, and equip you not to just get divorced, but also learn how to be divorced. Your host, certified divorce coach Karen McNenny, shares her wealth of knowledge, gets advice from other relationship experts, and interviews couples who learn how to have a good divorce, so you can too. Now here's your host, Karen.
Hey there, thanks for joining me today on the Good Divorce Show. Really appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen not only to me, Karen McNenny, your Good Divorce Coach, but to the families and survivors of divorce and, of course, our collection of experts. And today I'm so excited, a really unique guest, Abigail McGurty, who is a death doula. For just over 10 years, she has worked as a registered nurse in a variety of settings, beginning as an oncology nurse and later transitioning to critical care nursing, which proved to be a journey that changed her perspective on a number of things, including end-of-life care. And as many of you know who have been with me here on the Good Divorce Show, I really look at divorce as a death, as a transitional experience, which is part of why I'm excited to talk to Abigail. She has realized early in her career that end of life was a really precious time, but with more experience and reflection, it also has become apparent that the dying process also holds the capacity for deep human significance. And just like divorce, that ending can really be a powerful transition. And for her, exploring the significance ultimately is what led her to discovering the role that doulas in end-of-life care can provide. She is trained as a sacred passage doula and a conscious dying coach through the Conscious Dying Institute out of Boulder, Colorado. And as a doula, keeping people the richness of their living experiences and the values they hold is central to the support that's provided. And within that role, Abigail is poised to provide holistic and compassionate care. So she hopes that by listening with compassion and creating a space for people to ask questions, both big and small, that the dying process can be experienced with more comfort and ultimately less fear. And those of us who have walked the journey of divorce, we certainly know about fear and the fear of endings. So welcome to the show, Abigail.
Karen, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
And, you know, it makes sense in my mind why we're chatting with someone who is managing end of life. But I think it's really understated as an experience of people walking through divorce that it is a significant ending. It's a life transition. And I would go so far as to say it's a death. It's a formidable death, not only of the marriage, but of the future that we thought that we were going to have. So I'd like to start, if you will, in the balcony of the dance floor of these endings, and have you just fill us in a little bit, even thinking about your own training in this process of what is it that we tend to misunderstand about just grief and endings?
Yeah. I think kind of when we look at grief and endings, we often think of something that is often kind of taken outside of society. Our society really values productivity and growth and expansion and things kind of continuing on a planned trajectory that's always upward. And when we look at grief and endings, you're kind of inherently just a little bit removed from society. And I think that there's a way that it is kind of a shocking experience for people when they start to go through that, and it's really disorienting. And so when we delve into grief, it's a slow process. It's not something that is fast-paced. And so when we delve into that slowness, that depth of feeling and kind of that expansiveness, it is extremely difficult, and it can be very powerful. And so learning to walk through it a little bit differently, I think can be transformative.
You know, people always ask me, like, Karen, why would you want to hang out all day in your professional life with people going through divorce? I find it to be some of the most rewarding work I've ever done. And I spent the better part of 20 years in corporate America, helping those folks work on their relationships and learning more about human behavior. But there is such a satisfaction, and part of that is the transformation and showing people a different path, different possibilities.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm going to ask the same question of you, Abigail.
Yeah.
Why would you want to hang out with dying people and all their sad friends and families surrounded around them? What drew you to this work, and what keeps you?
Yeah, Karen, that is a great question. I think I really appreciated your perspective too, of that there is something that is so potent about being with folks that are in any type of transition. And I think that it can be something that just really allows for deep reflection. And I think that when we think of life, we often think that, death is the opposite of life. And really, I think that what we can think of it as is that we're kind of dancing between these polarities of birth and death, and we're kind of always doing that. And when we deny one of those polarities, we kind of miss out on an aspect of life. And so by pulling death or endings just a little bit closer, and really looking at it, I think that you can examine how you're living your life with so much more depth of, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be here forever. And I might not have this relationship forever. I might not have this job forever, whatever it is. And then you're able to live with so much more intention and clarity of what is joyful for you, what is bringing you meaning, what is the depth that you want to have in how you're living your life. And so I think that has always been something that's a little bit been there for me since I started my nursing career. And I started in oncology and then ended up moving into critical care. And so when I made that transition, critical care was obviously very different than oncology. And I kind of felt like I drifted away from some of those endings a little bit, and I got very burnt out ultimately working as a critical care nurse and decided to take a break. And so when I stopped, I just realized that aspect of life had been something that had really been following me kind of through my career. It felt like it was chasing me down, of something that I needed to pay attention to a little bit more carefully. And I really didn't want to go back into healthcare and was unsure of what to do. And I found the role of end-of-life doulas. And I really loved that end-of-life doulas work outside of the healthcare system. And they really work to normalize the dying process as a normal event of someone's life, that it isn't a medical event. It's an event of being human. And so really pulling that humanness into the dying process. And so that's what drew me to end-of-life doula work initially. And I was still like, gosh, I don't know if I want to do this. And at that time, I had a family member who was diagnosed with COVID and in the hospital. And I kind of was able to sit in on some family conversations and kind of sit between my family and the healthcare team and help to coordinate. And I think that experience really solidified that there's the way doulas work is we sit at transitions, we sit in the middle, we kind of hold that space and really help people to navigate these spaces that are inherently difficult. So it's been quite a journey to get here, and really satisfying, and has really changed how I live my life. So,
it's beautiful, and and not so dissimilar to the shift I was having. And, people looked at the divorce that I have with my husband and our children. It's been 13 years. We've gone from kindergarten to college on our co-parenting journey and being one family that lives across two homes, which is how we see ourselves as, the family's forever. And honestly, so's the relationship.
Right.
Marriage done. Relationship not done. Graduation, grandbabies, all of that still in the future. And so people were coming and asking me, how did you do it? And why is it that the two of you get along so well? Like there was this sort of anomaly. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this shouldn't be the unnormal. Like you said, the normalizing of death, which could be more normal and human. Like it isn't inevitable. Now, divorce is not inevitable. And I'm very pro-family and very pro-marriage. But when a relationship is complete, I think that there is wisdom in seeing the off-ramp that has presented itself and finding a way to take it with great intention. And I kept spinning around this idea of like being a divorce doula, right? Like how people guide us, like a birth doula. Here's a new thing that you've never done before that you have to navigate this big transition. And it's the same with like a death doula. And I was like, divorce doula. And I Googled it and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's people out there calling themselves a divorce doula.
Yeah.
And I see like this guide in new territory. And it always surprises me. I've only been witness to one passing, and it was a good death. And I think there is such a thing as a good divorce, and I know that you believe that there can be the good death experience. And I'm wondering if you would just share, like, what is the recipe of that? What are the elements that are present that in your mind categorize the good death? And then even what are the things that, like, why your industry exists, because we were not always doing death in a holistic, thoughtful, and intentional way, and some of the cautionary tales, if you will. So the comparing and contrasting of how we can do death and transitionings and those transformations in a more conscientious way.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I think when I was working in the hospital, I would have said a good death was at home and kind of had like a very specific set of circumstances. And I think that what I would say now is a good death is something that honors who the person is and their choices. And so I think that allowing someone to make these very conscious choices. And I think that sometimes there's a way that we can take what we think is a good death and kind of put it on someone else. And so what one person might want, say, like sound bowls and meditation and incense and kind of all of those types of things, and their people are around them and that feels really good. And someone else might be like, oh my gosh, that sounds like my nightmare. Do not do that to me. And I think that really it is about taking all of the elements that made someone whole and happy in who they are and not leaving them behind in their passing, but fully incorporating that. Like, what is their favorite music? What do they love to smell? What room do they love to be in? Kind of all of these things. And as much as you can incorporate that, bring that in. And if it's someone who wants everything done at the end of their life, then they can have that too. And so it's truly just making it what someone wants and needs in that moment in a way that is conscious and thought about and not a reaction to the situation, if that makes sense.
It sounds very client-centered.
Yes.
That's the language that's coming to it. And I feel the same way about birth, whether you have it at home or have it at a hospital or have a C-section. It shouldn't matter. Let's not put judgment on any of that. Let's be informed to find the thing that suits us. Exactly. And I think it's the same journey in divorce. And for those of you listening today, I really want you to hear and heed Abigail's wisdom about this client-centered. And in the case of the divorce, you can design your divorce. We're so quick to hand it over. In my case, it's the legal system that can hijack it and say, this is how it goes, and it's going to be adversarial, and you need to lawyer up, and you need to fight. And I'm like, please stop doing that. It's a family affair with a legal element, not a legal event with a family element. And I don't know if you would say the same, death is a human event, not a medical event. Like you said, and so often it's the well-intended lawyers, well-intended doctors and medical professionals who can hijack the experience, like you said, sort of put upon their own, this is how it should look or what we should do, and kind of forgetting the people that are in the story.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that that is, I really like how you say that it's a family event with a legal aspect. And yeah, I think that death and dying, it is such a human experience, and keeping it that first and foremost is, I think, the most important part of having a good death.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about this element of ambiguous loss. Is that a phrase that came up in your training or something that you've heard about before?
I haven't heard about it. Yeah.
I'm going to describe my understanding of it. And then I bet you'll start connecting dots. It's a new one to me. And divorce fits in this category of ambiguous loss. Family members with Alzheimer's, ambiguous loss. Family members that have been maybe lost in a tragic accident, but a body wasn't recovered. So it's that idea of something is gone but not gone. It's gone but not closure. The father with Alzheimer's, we say goodbye 2 years before their body dies.
Right.
Divorce, I'm done with this marriage and this person in this way, and my husband and the family we had, but oh my gosh, I'm texting him tomorrow about who has the ballet shoes and who's going to run the carpool. Gone but still present. Right. And I would imagine that there's, with family members and your client base, where maybe there's someone who's been in a coma or has had Alzheimer's or has been in a long series of, maybe cancer treatment, where the goodbye isn't in an instant.
Right. Yeah.
It sort of has this extended journey, and it can almost feel surreal. So I don't know. I'm just picking in your brain, because I know you've got all these little nuggets of experience of what that might look like. Your lens.
I think that that's a really interesting term. I hadn't heard that before, but I think that it is so applicable to so many situations of loss, because I think that it is a process of someone's last words might be days before that they actually pass. And so there's the reality that with something like Alzheimer's, there are little losses each day of the last time someone, does this or that, or is able to say this. And I think that the way we treat the grieving process is often that there's an event, something happens, and then you kind of begin the grieving process, when I think reality is that we grieve kind of on this continuum. And I can imagine with divorce as well, that you're grieving before the divorce, the grieving process has already started. And so I think that really honoring all of those little griefs as best you can, of noticing, okay, this is the last time they were able to say, I love you. They were able to smile at me. Did this. And I think honoring how big that is, even if they are still physically there, that is so hard, because I think that those little things are where connectivity is. And I think a loss of that connectivity with someone in how you interact and you experience them and kind of share love and joy and all of the things with someone, that is extremely powerful, and really not something to be taken lightly. And it does sound like, because there's almost like a lack of a physical aspect to that type of grief, that finding a way to bring it into the physical, to like let your body know almost that is something that you can grieve. And so sometimes folks will do what's called like a grief ritual, and it sounds very like lofty, but really what it's about is like, you know, writing something down, and maybe you can burn it or bury it or do something like that to kind of like let yourself bring something that feels like a loss that's kind of like up here and not totally tangible, and bring it into something that you as a human can really kind of wrap your mind around and understand.
I think that's such good advice. And I'm sad that ritual has gotten a bad name. Maybe not, right? Like, oh, it's woo-woo.
Right, right.
And it's such a part of our culture and kind of in our DNA.
Yeah.
And when it comes to marriage, oh my gosh, talk about ritual.
Right.
We spend so much time planning these weddings and the rings and the vows and what will be spoken and what will be sung, and like all of the culmination of the ritual of the coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage clients and guide clients in the undoing, the ritual of the undoing. And we talk about what's the day you'll take your ring off.
Right.
And I try to get people at the beginning. We're going to talk about beginnings. I have so many questions for you, Abigail. We're going to talk about grief and our resistance and the surrender moment, and when we see that off ramp and we resist kind of grief, we're afraid of big feelings. I think many of us.
Yeah.
And this idea of how do we ritualize the ending of one thing and the beginning of the other, and making it physical and the embodiment of it. Because feelings are this invisible, elusive presence, but when you can make it a tangible, we'll talk about when do we take our ring off? What's the agreement of that? When do we cut our social media ties to each other and I unfriend my spouse?
Yeah.
But we make agreements about that. When is it time to start dating again?
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, even with folks who are losing spouses and loved ones through physical death. What is the time and the process, and what does it take to reinvent and begin again? And the agreement around that. I think it's beautiful to have this idea of ritualizing the ending, being intentional about it. The other thing you brought up, which kind of rang a bell for me, was this idea of the kind of the micro grief. It doesn't happen in a day, and it doesn't, again, start in the snap of a moment. You know, I have a loved one who has Parkinson's, and that's a one-way trip.
Yeah.
It just is. And it can be 10 months, it can be 10 years, and little and gradual by gradual. And I think it's so true with people in the divorce story. Most of us know our truth long before we speak it. We don't want it to be the truth. And we resist it, and we go to counseling, and we work to save the marriage, and, you know, anything except an ending. And I'm wondering how you see resistance show up, maybe in the person who's dying, but also in the people around them, and then where that transforms to a surrender.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that there's a way that as people, we sometimes create our identity around our roles within society and our relationship to them. And so I think that there can be this sense of loss of, within the dying process of not being someone's partner. They're, not having the role of being someone's daughter, and kind of how we identify with those, and then recognizing that relationship is changing and shifting through the dying process, and kind of eventually leaning in and surrendering to it. But I think because of the way that we end up identifying so strongly with the roles, and then interacting in such a way that, like, that is what we are, instead of realizing that we are something bigger and we are currently in this role. Does that make sense, Karen? I don't know if I answered that.
Absolutely, because in my side of the story, it's identification as spouse,
Right.
as wife or husband,
Mm-hmm.
partner,
Right.
and there's such a reinvention of self on the other side of that death. I saw it with my mother, who, my grandmother moved to Missoula, Montana, where I lived for the last 8 years of her life.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, dutiful daughter, visited her virtually every day. And in the end, she came home to our family home and died in the living room. And it was kind of like Christmas, except for the Christmas tree, it was dying grandma. And we played pinochle, and we had dinner, and we laughed, and we gathered, and all the things that were happening. And even in those 3 weeks, we just saw her go from sitting and playing cards with us to eventually loss of, ability to interact and consciousness. And so in terms of the divorce identity coming out the other side and no longer being wife, and for those of us with children, it's also, I'm a parent all the time in my married life, to, I'm a parent part of the time.
Right.
So now what am I the other part of the time? I'm a sad single woman eating nachos standing up in my kitchen, because I'm certainly not going to make a meal for myself. And I'm not going to go out and have fun, because the guilt, right? There's like this, I don't know if that survivor's guilt, is that, same sort of thing. Like, how can I go forward and find the fulfillment in my life when there's this death experience?
Yeah.
Riff a little bit on that the guilt, the reinvention, and how, and the time that it takes. I think sometimes, in the same way that we think death is going to happen in a moment, we think the recovery,
right, it's going to be
linear
and quick, and and it's kind of what you were saying, Karen. It's never exactly how we planned for it to be, and so it is. I think the grieving process, it's not linear at all. I think that folks, one day they feel like, oh gosh, I've totally processed this aspect of the loss. And then it's almost like a spiral, like you come back around and you look at it from a slightly different angle, and then you're experiencing that loss again. And so the grief process, it takes a while. And I think that reinvention, I think in the same way that it's not this like clear cut, this is when it happens, and then we can kind of move on and we just create our new selves. I think that there's a way that we are taking parts of us with us, like we're taking grief and joy with us. We're not just doing one or the other. And I think that really that is what it means to be human, is to hold both and try to create that balance of sorting through, like, oh my gosh, I was this person in this marriage, and a part of me still identifies with some aspect of that, and I'm going to take that with me, and I'm going to create my new identity, and it ends up kind of being this interesting new menagerie of life experience that has shifted you and kind of moved you into a different way. And I think that guilt can be such a tricky thing to navigate, because, I think that there are aspects of us that don't think we should move forward, and that we're not allowed to. And so I think that really giving yourself permission to move forward, and recognizing that also you can move forward, but you don't have to leave everything behind. And so I think that there's creating space for just more room and more aspects of you to create wholeness.
Beautifully put. It. The phrase that comes to mind is yes and.
Yeah.
It's not either or.
Yeah.
It's yes and sometimes we get really bifurcated and black and white in our society, and we forget like the human condition is capable of holding so much simultaneously, and things that seem really conflicting, we can hold them simultaneously.
Yeah.
And you talked a little bit about, it's not this linear process, and I'm going to evoke Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the stages of death, and there might be other ways that you're talking about it. When I talk to my clients, I tend to describe it, you're a ping pong ball in a shoebox.
Yeah.
And anytime that shoebox gets moved, you don't know when, you don't know where, you don't know how, and you're just kind of all over the place. And then it might settle for a bit, and then it gets shook up again. You might have a more articulate descriptor of traditionally what we know as the stages of grief. But I'd be really curious whether that is the model of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, or within your training, if there's other ways that, for those listening that are a little more black and white, we kind of like to know, like, okay, I'm going to go through this part, I'm going to go through this part. And again, we'll tell you the parts, but you can't count on their duration or their sequence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she's that model of grief, I think it's incredible. And I really like your description of it being like a shoebox and it kind of being shaken up. And I think for the person that maybe thinks of things a little bit more black and white, like, oh gosh, I appreciate you because I am that person a lot of times. I totally get it. I totally get it. Right. Yeah, right. It's such it's so reasonable. You want to know when things start and when things end. And I think that there's a way that you can just gently shift that a little bit into some curiosity of, how do I name what I'm experiencing in the moment? Like, oh, right now I'm in denial. And then knowing that that's normal. And maybe now I'm in anger. And
can you give us a quick recap for our listeners who are either dusting off their memory or have not yet been introduced to the model by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross? Could you just tell us a little bit about some of the framework of the stages of grief, and one way that we can describe them and understand them?
Yeah, so the way Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has the stages of grief kind of defined is that we start out in denial. And we kind of we go through this denial process, and then we move to anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and then hope. And some of the models show it as kind of a linear curve of what the process looked like. And there is an updated model, which basically it links them all together. So if you were to look at kind of a spiral situation, and it links denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then it kind of spirals back out to acceptance, hope, and then back into denial. And so it kind of acknowledges, I think I really like this visual because it really acknowledges that grief is it doesn't have that start and that end. And so it really helps to kind of almost illustrate that shoebox of, we are going to ricochet around this. We're not going to just kind of come out the other side and then we're totally reinvented and we don't have to experience that anymore. It really is this process of just kind of going through those things in different ways, kind of as we experience the grieving process.
And I think that, the normalizing, like you said, and when you're feeling anger, that's okay, like that permission giving. And you might stay in anger, denial, bargaining, denial, back to anger, right?
Right.
Even though they talk about a sequence, again, you might just be the ping pong, bouncing around in it. Mm-hmm. And I came across some information about that model that one of her students or her mentees, after she had passed, and I cannot recall his name, but he went back to kind of her family and the foundation and said, I really feel like there's another stage here that we haven't talked about, which is how we make meaning afterwards. Like why? And it's one thing when your 97-and-a-half-year-old grandfather passes away in their sleep. It's another when the 7-year-old is taken by cancer, by an accident, right? And in the same, the marriage that was 30 years strong, and suddenly your spouse comes home and says, I'm out, baby. Or the family that experienced the loss of a child and the marriage could not transcend that. You know, we can't always anticipate it. And just that feeling of how we make meaning of something that we never set out. I mean, death is different than divorce. Death is a given, folks. Divorce is not. But even in that, the resistance or the denial of it.
Yeah. And I think that there's ways that making meaning, it can be hard, because I think then it does kind of open up the full complexity of emotions. And I think that when folks are at the end of their life and their families can do this for them as well, that legacy projects can be kind of a really beautiful way to make meaning. And no matter
legacy project, what do you mean?
Yeah. So legacy projects, it's basically a way for the person to, if the person is doing it, I should say, it's a way for them to kind of carry on their legacy in the way that they want. And so it can be very simple. Some folks do like an ethical will. And so they write down their ethics and life lessons that they want to pass on to their family. And so then that's something that can be given to their family. And kind of through the process of that, it's both a gift to the person that's creating it, because they are able to reflect on their life and be like, oh yeah, that is something that was really important to me, and kind of do that meaning making themselves. But then I think also for the person that's receiving it, they have then received something that is this like completion, this moment of like this memory of who they are, and then they can kind of go through it in their own process and make meaning from their perspective. So ethical wills are one way to do it. Another thing is, scrapbooks, recipe books that you can give to folks. My mom, when my grandparents passed away, she found a bunch of their love letters and put them together for us. And it was kind of a beautiful way to then go back and see, not only who they were, but what their lives were, and kind of what that meant being their grandchild. And really, you're kind of able to make meaning from these little nuggets of their life that are then given to you. And I think that for the situation where it's, a child passes away, and that is such a devastating event, that going through and creating a legacy for their life, I think can be really beautiful and special, and exceptionally hard. But I think it is where, in those moments of deep, deep love from their parents, of creating a legacy project for, say, a 7-year-old, that you can acknowledge how precious their life was, and that their impact was big.
Oh my gosh. You have just got me thinking about how we speak about those that have passed, and how we speak about those that we have divorced. And what if we borrowed a page from the honoring? I'm just thinking about, Uncle Joe Bob, who everyone hated. He was just a total asshole. He wasn't kind. He wasn't generous. He dies. There's a funeral and people only have great things to say about them,
Mm-hmm.
right? We always honor the dead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think for a moment, listeners, as you consider the legacy, the story that you continue in your own mind about your former spouse, and what if we spoke about them or even thought about them as if they were dead? Now, this is not one of those Hollywood movies like, I wish they would just die. They'd be better off dead. But really considering, there was a love story. For most of us, there was a wildly wonderful love story that brought us to the altar and the ritual of marriage and these children that were created from love. And I think you don't have to throw that away. You don't have to, again, it's yes and. Yes, there was a love story. Yes, there was a wedding. Yes, these children crafted, and now that marriage is complete, and we can go into this other chapter and still honor that story that was. Now, I know this is not true, especially for those of you listening who are maybe in a relationship that is abusive or mired in addiction or mental health issues. But there's a lot of us just normal neurotics running around in the world who just are having average divorces coming out of our just complete marriages, and we just need to get unmarried. And they're not these big dramatic stories. And even the ritual, and something that I recommend to my clients is, if spouse had died, we would have photos of them in our home. We would certainly have photos for the children to still see their father or their mother. So I recommend that families do that. So in my home, when the kids were young, there were photos of their father. Now, not next to my bed, but next to theirs. Not in my bathroom, but in their bathroom. Not necessarily on the refrigerator, but maybe. And, Michael and I made that commitment to each other. Like, we'll each make a collage of photos of the person we just divorced, of them and them with their children, so that even when they were away from that parent, the parent's memory, their legacy, their presence was still in the household. And I remember being over at his home and visiting the kids in the room and looking at their new bunk beds, which was a beautiful gift. Some people put up these huge boundaries, like, you will not cross the threshold of mine. I'm like, just give it up, people. It's just not worth it. Just find the easier path. And he had put this collage together of me and the kids and together. And one of the photos in there was me in my wedding dress. It wasn't us together on our wedding day, but it was me from that day. And that we didn't erase. Oh, I'm getting a little verklempt. We didn't erase that part of our children's story. Yeah. Because part of their story is their parents' wedding day, is the love story.
Yeah. That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's,
yeah,
I think, exceptionally special and such a beautiful legacy project, like you say, and of
the marriage, and the story that brought us to this place that we call family.
Yeah.
And that we can still have kind of the essence and the joy and the richness of family.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Oh, it's such an important conversation we're having today. We just have not really talked about this on the podcast before, and the reality of the death journey, and we really underestimate it, and I think we neglect families going through grief. And again, even just thinking about the death of family and the death of a loved one. If my husband had actually died, so many people would have shown up at my front door with a casserole. There would have been a meal train. There would have been people just helping in all sorts of ways. But because our family had gone through a divorce, it was like, I don't know what to say to them. I'm going to turn the other way. I'm going to see them in the grocery. Like, we don't know how to manage it. And I'm sure that you find the same thing. Like, we're not really good at talking about death and these big feelings. Are there skills or tools or conversations that you have with their clients so that they can more easily embrace, again, the normalcy of what's happening?
Yeah. I think it's kind of a a mix of a few different things. So what I'd say is that for the person who maybe you tell about, any type of loss, and they react in a way that they're not sure what to do. And what I'd say is that it's not your job to control their experience, and that recognizing that that's a reflection of their discomfort, and that's okay. And it's not something that you need to fix for them. And they will be able to sort through it. It's okay. They're adults. And so kind of letting them have their experience, and it might be uncomfortable. And then I think as someone who's going through grief, I think that there's a way that you can kind of sort through your list of support people and kind of know how they respond to these types of situations. That you might have your friend that is like the fixer. You might have your friend that like they just let you cry. And you might have your friend that's like, hey, let's just go out and have a good time. Let's just forget all of this. And just know that it, don't call the fixer when you just need to cry, and really knowing that like, okay, these are my people, and I'm going to kind of reach out to them as I need these different things, and kind of knowing what you need and then reaching out. And I think it's important too to have people in your life that you're like, hey, is it okay if I talk to you? I'm kind of a mess, and just please don't fix the situation. And kind of set up the boundaries so that they know what to give you and how to succeed in that interaction in a way that's supportive. And so I think it's a mix of like, not necessarily controlling someone's experiencing, like let them have that experience themselves, knowing what your resources are, and then kind of within that, kind of setting up clear containers for what you need, and knowing that if they can't give that to you, setting it up so that they might feel comfortable being like, oh my gosh, I actually don't have space for that today, and that's okay too. And so then it kind of creates a little bit more of a safer container to express what you need to, if there are some of those clear boundaries, and knowing which person to reach out to.
Oh my gosh, I think that is so wise. And I hope those of you listening really take that to heart. It's hard to ask for help. But when you put a little bit of agency on it, and to know your circle of support, and then be really clear about what you need and what you don't need. I always say, train your community to not ask you why you're getting divorced. That's the worst question.
Right. Yeah.
Because usually the people going through the divorce can't even answer it in, less than 5,000 pages of explanation. Mm-hmm. Ask how I'm doing, not why we're doing it. Mm-hmm. That is a better shift. Mm-hmm. Abigail, this is just such a rich and important conversation, and we're going to begin to draw to a close. And as we do so, I'm wondering, where do you find people kind of get it wrong? What would you advise them to do differently as we think about transitions and grief and significant loss?
Yeah. Thank you, Karen. I think that the thing that I run into most in my practice is not being called soon enough. And when you really don't have to wait to start the end of life planning process. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. And when you just put a plan in place, you can always adapt it as your life circumstances change. And so getting that plan in place, what it can look like is, the legal aspect. So maybe getting an advance directive, talking to a lawyer if needed, and getting all of that squared away. And what people will say is that sometimes end of life planning, it feels like it can be a little bit limited to what to do with your things and what to do with your medical needs. And there is such a broad range of integration of life and legacy projects and kind of all of those other things that we've talked about. And that can start at any point. And so that's all appropriate for an end-of-life doula. It's obviously most important if you have received a life-limiting or life-altering diagnosis, but it can happen at any point. And so reach out sooner rather than later and start the process. And so you can do just the planning process with an end-of-life doula, or you can kind of have more and more services as you need them. So it doesn't have to be a continuous relationship. It can be broken up by however many months or years you need.
As needed.
Yeah, exactly, as needed. Yep.
Once again, I'm just kind of astonished at the parallel. I do think I'm a divorce doula today. Of I think people stay too long. They wait and they start creating crisis in divorce in the marriage so that they can justify the divorce, rather than just like we know this is eroding. We know this is going south, and can we exit? But somehow we think there has to be some big drama. And so sometimes we even create that drama, right, and the self-sabotage. And it does damage to the future relationship. And just like death, it's as if we talk about it. We get life insurance. We do legacy projects. We talk to like it's going to bring it on. It's like the prenuptial agreement. Yeah. Doesn't mean you're going to get divorced. It just means if you do. I have been flying a lot the last month, and every time I get on the plane, the first thing they do is tell me, if this plane should run into trouble, this is what we want you to do. This is what we want you to know. Now, nobody ever thinks, why are they so negative? Why do they keep talking about the plane going down? That's only going to make it go down. No. We have this great admiration, and we embrace every single time that plane takes off. The first thing they're going to do is say, if you run into trouble, here are some things you should know. I really think I should write a TED Talk about this.
I think you should.
What would the flight attendant of divorce say to you? I often think that within the first year of a child's life is when we should write the parenting plan for that child. If we were to be separated, what would we want this life to look like for this child and for us? Because it's when we're the most in love and we're so invested and we're like this precious. Because what I see 10, 15 years down the road, 20 years, and then we're weaponizing that child over, I want 3 more hours on Christmas Day. Like, no, because I know the day that child was born, that is not what you would want for them.
Right.
So much wisdom in this conversation. You were just so beautifully articulate about the work that you do. And I had a hunch, and listeners, Abigail and I, this is the first time we've ever had a conversation about this.
Oh, that's true.
But when I learned about you and the work that you were doing, I immediately wanted to bring you on the show. And my heart is having a little squeeze again. Because there is so much emphasis in the world of divorce about assets and division and time and custody. And we forget that there is this enormous emotional journey of transformation that's also happening. And we deserve guidance. We deserve a doula for someone to walk us through that path. So thank you for bringing your passion and your wisdom. How do people find you? And if you need a divorce doula, find the good divorce coach. But there might be somebody who's also listening who's thinking about end-of-life issues as well, or wants to talk more about grief in any aspect of their life. I think you would be a wonderful resource. So where can people reach out and find you?
Yeah, Karen, thank you so much. This has just been, such a heart-filling conversation. So thank you. Yeah, you can reach out to me on my website. It's abigailmcgurty.com, and my email is hello@abigailmcgurty.com. So that's the best way to reach me.
We'll make sure that's in the show notes for those of you who are walking the dog, vacuuming, doing laundry, or driving while you're listening to us today. We'll make sure that you can look back and find Abigail. And just reminding all of you, thank you again for sitting down with me today and Abigail here on the Good Divorce Show and giving yourself the time and the opportunity to learn how to better support yourself or those that you know are walking through any variation of grief. And I will remind you, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Thanks for listening. Do you have questions or thoughts about this week's episode? Let us know by following the Good Divorce Coach on Facebook and Instagram @GoodDivorceCoach, and leave a comment. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific or listen anytime wherever you get your podcasts.